The original Lion King film is one of those movies that I can easily say shaped my childhood in the best way possible. In fact, in a lot of ways, I think I consider it to be my definitive Disney animated movie. You know, back when Disney wasn't completely creatively bankrupt. While I'm on the subject, much respect to the legend James Earl Jones, may he rest in peace. As far as these new Lion King films go, like everything else, Disney decided to take something that was perfect the way that it was, and completely remove everything that was special about it, and the result was a soulless cash grab remake that unfortunately made a ton of money. So naturally, Disney decided to capitalize on that financial success and make an unnecessary prequel. And if I'm being honest, the results were pretty much exactly what I expected. Let's discuss.
I watch so you don't have to.
Ooh, it tingles me.
Before I get started, I'd like to kindly ask that you hit the like button, and please subscribe to the channel for more content just like this.
Come on. Do it. Do it!
Mufasa the Lion King follows an orphaned lion cub who meets a sympathetic lion named Taka, the heir to the royal bloodline. The chance meeting sets in motion an expansive journey of an extraordinary group of misfits searching for their destinies. Before I get into anything, I need to address the large African-sized elephant in the room. Yes, just a few weeks after Wicked, this is yet another instance of modern Hollywood taking an iconic villain and making them sympathetic.
Stop it!
Does anyone remember villains like, I don't know, Hans Gruber, who just like to kill people and rob people just for the love of the game? When I say that I miss those types of characters, I truly mean that. I would consider Hans Gruber an interesting villain, and we did not need a convoluted backstory about how he was wronged in some way to come to that conclusion. Somewhere along the way, Hollywood forgot how special characters like that can be if they just let them exist in a moment in time and not try to over-explain everything. And Mufasa the Lion King is the very definition of a movie trying to over-explain things. If you were ever curious about how Rafiki got his stick, this movie will tell you how. If you were ever curious about how Pride Rock was formed, this movie will tell you how. This movie is filled with so many callbacks, references, nostalgia bait, and heavy-handed foreshadowing that it's almost hard to believe that it was directed by an Academy Award-winning filmmaker.
I don't get it.
I mean, was Barry Jenkins contractually obligated to make this movie no matter what? Because it does kind of feel that way. It's just one of those movies that's constantly winking at the audience and saying, remember when this happened in a much better movie? Well, here's what led to that moment, so I command you to feel something. But that's the thing, it's very hard to feel anything when it feels like you are watching the Cliff Notes version of that story. Was this movie all bad? Absolutely not. On more than one occasion, I saw storytelling details that would have been a lot more interesting had they not rushed through them. I genuinely believe that even though I don't think this movie needs to exist in the first place, that there is actually a good story in this movie somewhere that should have been told a lot better.
That makes sense.
It's always refreshing and interesting to see a character come from nothing and turn themselves into something. It's a trope that's been used very effectively in movies since the beginning of time. And having the amount of love for the character of Mufasa that I do, I should have felt something seeing him become that character. But I didn't feel anything, at least not as much as I should, and that, my friends, is called a missed opportunity. Another missed opportunity comes in the form of the character of Scar, who, if I'm being honest, has a very inconsistent story arc. It feels like he goes from being a loyal brother to a betrayer really quickly. I would have liked to have seen him have a more gradual descent into evil, rather than just have him basically snap over a girl. Now, I understand that there was more contained within the movie that went into his evolution, but that was the thing that pushed him over the edge and I just couldn't buy into that.
I'm surrounded by idiots.
The power or the loss of power is what should have drove him most, because we know that's what he desires. And there's a little bit of that desire shown, but not nearly enough to make him consistent with the villain that we are familiar with. The villains through most of the movie are a pack of white lions, led by a pretty intimidating lion, voiced by Mads Mikkelsen. A little underdeveloped as a villain, but I think Mads does just enough to give the character the shot of life that it needs. I remember when I watched the remake, I had a ton of issues with how the characters were animated. I remember them just coming off as these dull, emotionless, soulless husks. And they do try to rectify that just a little bit in the prequel by giving the animals more facial expressions, and I do think that it's better, but I still couldn't help but feel like something was off with the animation. And it's just very hard for me to get invested in a story that's being carried by characters who were brought to life in this way.
How can you not care?
Like this.
Perhaps another sign that some things are better left in the 2D animation medium. I know it sounds like I'm shitting all over this movie and that I hated every second of it, but I actually didn't. All things considered, I felt like some of the fight scenes, as well as the action sequences, had a certain level of tension to them that made them more entertaining than I thought they'd be. And the film actually didn't look as bad overall as I thought it would. Sure, some of the character animation is a bit weird, but I thought that some of these CGI landscapes looked absolutely beautiful. There were also a handful of heartfelt moments that I felt did work, and most of them had to do with the family aspect of the film and the whole concept of parents continuing to live on through their children. I found that to be a nice little aspect of the emotional core of this film that was carried over from the original film. If I'm being honest, the rest of the messaging or lessons in the film came off a bit clunky.
Message!
As far as the musical numbers go, having heard them, maybe it would have been better to just leave them out. When you think about all of the iconic musical numbers in the original film, and you compare that to whatever the hell they were trying to do here, it actually is quite embarrassing. Especially when you consider that there are actual singers or musicians in the cast. Not exactly a ringing endorsement for their musical careers. When it comes right down to it, I actually like the prequel better than the remake. Although that is a pretty low bar. But at least the prequel tried to do something a little bit different, even if some of those things didn't work. I do think that this is a story that might have been worth telling. They just needed to do a better job of telling it. Outside of a handful of moments, most of this movie consisted of predictable plot points and cheap fan service that didn't do enough to justify this movie's existence or add to Lion King lore. It's definitely not the worst movie I've seen all year, but it's also something that I don't need to watch again, and that's why I'm going to give it the Careless Sam Gerard.
I don't care! Y'all be cool. Right on.